Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Excuse the terrible lighting. I am not in prime studio lighting right now. I wish I was, but we're not doing that right now. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of the interviews in my Delicacy series. For those of you that don't know, Delicacy is a project that I'm conducting over YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. You can follow me all right here. Instagram, jordan.bailey.d. Facebook, Jordan Bailey. If you want, you can follow me on Twitter here as well, right there. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel when you're done watching the video. Give the video a big thumbs up. Share it. Introducing this video. So it was myself, my very best friend Lexi from the 3rd grade, and her mother. We are sitting around chatting about women's health. Lexi went to school for kinesiology and sports science and medicine and that kind of thing. So I talked to her a lot about, what the fuck, who am I kidding? You'll see in the video what we talk about, but in general, it was about women's health in general and kind of how it's evolved and the progressions that we see women's health going in the coming years. And just we're talking about some women's health. This isn't specifically about breast cancer, so I apologize if that's what you were looking for today. Next week I have a very, very, very special surprise for the interview, so I'm very excited about that. But for this interview today, we are talking generally about women's health. So sit back, relax, enjoy the video, and don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next time.
Which foundations and organizations
Right.
actually use the money for what they say they're going to use the money for.
Right.
Do you need me to move? Do you need her to move? But a lot of organizations now, I know, I saw one the other day, it was one that builds houses for injured veterans, houses. And it's something like 98%, 97% of all of the money that's donated goes toward actually building the houses. So they take very, very little money for everything else. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay.
Usually the rest of that is administrative costs.
It's
actually keep it running, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, it's just to set, sending out flyers or following up, postage and paper and stuff like that. So, the whole thing is that you do have to be really careful because there's a lot out there and that money doesn't go where you think it's going. Why are you back this weekend? Is it for your birthday, which is next?
So it was a combination of things. So it gave me an opportunity to come back and celebrate because Rex's birthday is this weekend, my birthday is next weekend, so we wanted to do like a combined birthday thing. And then Lori Martin was willing to be interviewed, so we just scheduled it for this weekend too, so we can just get it all done in one weekend, and I can grab whoever in Virginia wants to be interviewed or just like talk about this stuff.
Did you try and get Christy?
She wasn't available for yesterday.
Okay.
So I was only able to get Lori and then her friend Tina, who had stage 2 cancer. She's about 3 months behind in the process that Lori is at now. So they're both pretty much done with their official treatment.
Right.
Now they're all going through the post-treatment and dealing with that whole craziness.
Yeah.
Never off medication. Never ever off the medication.
No. And the scary thing is you can be good like my cousin was. You can be good for a while and then 20 years later it can pop back up.
Yeah.
So I would imagine that that's a scary, scary thing, it just kind of sits there,
Right. So I guess the first, general question is just more so, what is your experience? What is your experience with breast cancer? What's up? Is it?
Well, I would probably be the odd one in the project that you're doing in that, like I said to you before, no one in my family has had cancer of any kind on either my mother's side or my father's side. We have all sorts of other things we have to deal with. Lots and lots of heart disease and kidney disease, but we haven't had that. I think, basically my thing, I had relatives that have married into the family that have had breast cancer. And my one aunt, who's a blood aunt, who did have breast cancer, was completely attributed to hormone replacement therapy.
Okay.
So I'm kind of more on the side of
You had the relatives that went through it. You had
I saw it, and gone through that. But mine is really more like, I don't like the one size fits all kind of medicine, and that's like more and more what we're moving into.
Sure.
And I don't necessarily think that it helps all women.
Let's chat about that then. Let's chat about that. I guess we can just start with the basic of what about it is sort of the number one thing that is super frustrating about.
I think the super frustrating thing is that insurance and medicine prescriptions in general are all for making money.
Right.
And so therefore it's not actually about people's health. And I think the thing is right now with, every woman needs to have a mammogram and it needs to be free. Okay, that's fine. Mammogram machines are grossly expensive, and doing a mammogram is the most expensive thing you can do in the process. So I'm more about opening up medicine and saying, really, it needs to be between the doctor and the patient. In my case, my doctor knows absolutely I do not want to get mammograms.
And you haven't had a mammogram in 15
I haven't had
years.
a mammogram. I want to say it might be more like 13
Okay.
years. The last time I had one, it was extremely painful. I think, if we're going to talk about breast cancer, we have to talk about breasts.
Absolutely.
Not all breasts are the same.
Absolutely.
And my breasts happen to be extremely dense, and it's difficult to get them smashed down to pancake size. So I don't understand why a sonogram can't be done, because
Sure.
they do the sonograms after the mammograms. Well, sonograms, every OBGYN has one in their office, pretty much. And they cost less. They don't get as much money off of them.
Yeah.
And my doctor suggested to me, which is one thing I think was really cool, which is breast thermography. And it's kind of done like, it's the same sort of thing as you would get like a topography for mountains and stuff like that. You know? But because of the fact that there is no cancer in my family, that's a better first step. Unfortunately, insurance doesn't pay for it.
Yikes.
So but they don't pay for it because it's only about $200.
Okay.
They make no money off of it.
Right.
But they should still pay for it.
Yeah, because it's still a health thing.
I'm saving them money by having
Right.
it done. And you stand there, and it takes a picture. And so then it goes in and it looks for little hot spots. Does it see any hot spots or colder spots? And they look at it and they go, yeah, we have a little grouping of hot spots over here. Maybe you ought to get a mammogram.
Right.
So it's a first step, and it tells. But if everything looks good, they're like, yeah, it looks.
Don't need to get a mammogram.
We're not seeing anything. Yeah, you're doing your breast exam. Do I feel anything? Are there any lumps? Anything? No. You're probably okay.
Yeah.
And I just think that that's not even something that is normally offered to a woman.
It's not even offered as an option by a doctor.
It's not even offered as an option, and I think that's kind of crazy. If they were paid for. And it's only costing the insurance company, $200, $250. That seems to me, again, we're not a one-size-fits-all. That seems to me for somebody with no history of breast cancer in their family, wouldn't that be the better way to go at first?
Sure.
And then wait and see.
Sure.
So that's kind of like where I am. And I get a little scared when everybody keeps talking about like universal medicine and all of that. I've already seen what it's like for somebody on Medicare with a different disease, with multiple sclerosis, which my brother has, where you don't get a choice of what medication that you use. You are told what you can use. And I think those are scary things to go into, because what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for another, or the needs of one person aren't the same as the needs for another.
Right.
And so I kind of think it's nice for people to have some options.
Right. Find something that's a little more personalized for your for your
Right.
needs. Like my healthcare as a 24-year-old is not going to be the same as your healthcare. You know.
Sure, it's not. Yeah, absolutely. They're very different. You're not going to have high cholesterol and high blood pressure. I hope not. You know, as a 24-year-old, sure,
Yeah.
those sort of things shift, and I just think, you know, if you go to and you do a whole background on people, well, then, you know, you take a look at me and go, yeah, well, your father had a heart attack at 44.
Mm-hmm.
Both of your grandfathers had heart attacks. Your one grandfather had 5 heart attacks. Let's put our money
Yeah.
and let's put what we're looking at for you over in that area.
Right.
Because your heart's going to be your issue. Your breasts are no problem. Let's, you know what I'm saying? So it's,
Yeah.
I just feel like everybody has to be looked at as an individual.
Do you know roughly, like, cost-wise, like, what kind of copay did you have to pay when you last did your mammogram?
Wow. Because it was a while ago. I'm trying to think, like, I know I've had CAT scans, and it was, I want to say, roughly in the neighborhood of about $500 maybe was a copay for a CAT scan.
Jeez, wow.
I think.
Yeah.
I think I'm trying to remember because all of this.
And this
was,
is all under having health insurance and everything, too.
Yes. Now, our health insurance over 2010, 2011 has gone up 137%, our premiums.
Right.
So,
Wow.
oh yeah.
That's crazy.
Oh yeah. We had gone from paying somewhere around $350 a month for our premiums to, now I have to say at this particular point in time that I'm going to give this quote, this was also, my husband was working for a small company, so the company was only paying 50%, as most of them will pay somewhere around 80.
Sure.
And we were paying $1,000 a month in premiums, and the company was paying $1,000 a month. So it was $2,000 a month. I said, why are we even getting health care? We only spend between the two of us around $10,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
So why are we paying $24,000 a year, and then we're still doing copays?
Right.
My last doctor's appointment, when I went in and I had all my blood work done, my copay out of that, my copay and then my share of being paid, that was $157.
Mm-hmm. That's so much money.
It's a lot of money. And I'm like, well, what are we paying all this money for in the premiums? I keep thinking, wouldn't this be better if I'm going to put $1,000 a month towards premiums? Why don't I just put that in a health savings account?
Right.
You know?
And use it for when I need it.
When I actually need it, because generally speaking, I'm about $5,000 a year, and my husband's about $7,000 or $8,000 a year.
Sure.
That's what like altogether. If you do all of our prescriptions, 2 doctor's appointments,
Right.
two doctor visits, two because we both get our blood done twice a year.
Sure. You're at like $12,000 a year for just general.
Just
go to the
general.
doctor, make sure you're healthy.
That's not our premium. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
you know the charges are for each of those things.
Right.
We would pay those straight up out of pocket ourselves and save more money than we have now.
Why do you think there are such high expenses towards women's health on things like mammograms, on things like, and we don't get to talk about like the thermograms?
Well, I mean, women do have more issues. We get pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
So.
We bear children.
Okay, so I'll tell you. So Lexi. Okay, so this is my last child because I had 2, and both of them were born. My ex-husband was in the military, but Lexi cost $20, beginning to end, and I was I was working for Nordstrom, and my monthly premiums were not that much. I was paying them because Nordstrom had better health care than my husband's job, so we went with Nordstrom, and she was literally a $20 copay,
In and out.
everything else was covered.
Wow.
And that was 23 years ago. That is not the case now.
Oh, absolutely. Especially with it
Not the case
increasing
now.
with the
So much more
inflation
expensive now.
and
Right.
all the things that go into
She was
money.
$20 top to bottom.
How did the conversation happen as far as you figuring out what you wanted to do instead of getting a mammogram done?
Okay, so I've been through a couple of doctors recently because the doctor that I had been with since 1998 They decided after all the healthcare changes that they wanted to go through MDVIP, which you pay $1,600 a year. And then your insurance on top of that covers things. That's a certain guarantee that you will get same day, you know. You get a guaranteed hour for your annual visit, and you get same day service if you're sick or whatever. Okay, so anyway, I lost my doctor. So then I had to go through other doctors. And I think the biggest thing for me was going to the doctor. They always had very rote things. I need you to get a mammogram. I need you to get a colonoscopy. I need you to get these things. And I'm like, okay, that's great, but none of those things have anything to do with what I'm here to see you about.
Right.
And so that got very frustrating for me. I finally went back to my doctor I'd had before, who had been, again, with the group that had gone this other direction. She now does no insurance. She doesn't take any insurance at all. And you have a guaranteed hour and a half your first visit, and you pay out of pocket, and then I could go file the claim myself. And I went back to her because she was a doctor who had helped me through something back in 2003. She stuck with me the whole way until we could figure things out. And she's the type of doctor that's going, let's take care of your problems. And these over here that aren't problems, we're going to put these over here in this pile over here. And she said, okay, I get it. I understand. You don't want to have a mammogram. She's the one that told me about the thermography. And she said, I think in your case, it will be just fine because of what your family history is. She used to take care of my mother years ago, actually. So, yeah, she's the one that suggested. And I remember talking to her. I said, I've never even heard of this. And she said, nobody has. It's not pushed by doctors because they're here to push mammographies. And they, she said, I don't care. I don't deal with pharmaceutical vendors. I don't deal with insurance. I deal straight up with the patient. And so I can recommend anything I want that I feel works for my patient. And she said, someday, hopefully, she said, if you wait another 2 years, they might cover it for insurance. But she said, right now they don't. And she said, but it only runs about $200, $250. And I'm like, well, I can do that.
Yeah.
I can pay that out of pocket. That's not a problem.
How much would it have been for you to pay for a mammogram out of pocket?
I would have to go back and look what a mammogram is straight up and not with a copay because I don't really know. Like I said, it's been about 13 I can't remember
something longer than 10 years.
than a decade since I had one. Yeah, so I am not sure, and I'm sure the price has gone up since then because
insane craziness.
The price has gone up on everything else.
Right.
So yeah, but she's the one that suggested it to me, and I was like, I can do that. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
And you went in, you got it done.
And you get it done, and they're like, if they see anything, they go, yeah, you want to go a little further. And if they don't see anything, they go, you're probably pretty
fine.
good.
Yeah.
Have it done again in a year. Okay. That's how I found out about it.
Makes sense. Okay. Yeah. What do you think is kind of because I feel like there's a lot of weird blockage as far as doctors' interests with insurance and pharmaceutical things and in connection with women's health and how sometimes more intricate our health can become. Just because, like you said, we deal with a few more issues that tend to be a little more extensive.
Yeah, women's issues are, I think it's kind of funny because unless you go into gynecology, most doctors, they kind of brush over a lot of women's issues. And even in gynecology, they brush over a lot of women's issues. They basically look at the woman as being here.
Yeah.
Not
all of it.
Here. And a lot of women use their gynecologist as their primary care doctor. Like, they go once a year and they go, oh, as long as all my girl parts are fine, it's all good. And they're not seeing a regular doctor who's taking a look at their heart and their thyroid and, all of these other different things that are happening. I think women are more complicated than men physically, as far as, like I said, women have children and everything. But, okay, interesting article, slightly off topic from this.
No, sure.
There's a fantastic article that was put out in the AARP magazine about menopause in women. That your average doctor doesn't even get coverage in class when they're studying, when they're getting their MDs, doesn't get more than a passing chat in a class about menopause. Even gynecologists.
Wow.
They
Gynecologists don't get much
have
of a
no
chat.
talk about what happens to a woman, and it's not just, people go, oh, it's menopause. Okay, you stop having your period. That it's one heck of a lot more than that.
Yeah.
It messes with every single solitary part of your body, and doctors don't know. They don't know what to do. They don't want to deal with it. But it has severe issues with the heart, clearly with hormones and everything else like that.
Because you stop producing large amounts of estrogen, right?
Stop producing estrogen. And basically that just allows the small amount of testosterone that we women do have to pump it up more, which is why women have issues with facial hair.
Right.
And we'll start getting the occasional whisker.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. It's definitely the weight gain. It's all the weight gain goes around the middle. Well, what does that do? It puts pressure on all the organs and the heart. And it's so difficult for a woman once they're in menopause to lose the weight. Not all women go through it. Not all women go through that.
It's the
I
same
know a
thing that
number
you keep
of
putting
people,
on as like it's not a one size fits all thing.
Exactly. I know a number of women that I've come across, and they're like, yeah, I didn't really even seem to notice menopause. I never had hot flashes, and I just want to smack them, because my husband, my daughter living here while I was going through it, I would just go, oh, I'm having hot flashes coming.
Everyone stop.
Hot flashes coming, just to let you know. And to have an understanding of what a hot flash is, it's not that anybody can understand it till you've experienced it, because it starts in your core and radiates out. And it can be freezing outside, and it can be happening, and you're just going like, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God. And it's just, but doctors they don't study it. There's nobody who really specializes in
Truly in women's health.
in that aspect, and it does have problems with the heart. Women's heart attacks are very different than men's.
Really?
Very different. Their symptoms are different. Where they will feel it, how they'll behave. Women will be more nauseous. They'll feel things more in their back, their jawline. They'll feel more in through here. Not necessarily the heart.
Right.
They don't know they're having a heart attack.
Oh.
And so females and heart attacks are very different. And as they get older, that and the menopausal, that all changes as well.
Wow.
It was
So there
fascinating
there
article.
really isn't anyone who very much specifically studies women's health in ages 40
Right.
plus.
Even in geriatric, even doctors who specialize in geriatrics
Don't
do
quite
not
understand
specialize in menopause.
How crazy! That is a whole cycle in women's health that we're just kind of missing.
You want to talk about being ignored? There you go.
Dang.
And if you consider your average woman hits menopause right around 55 on average, some are earlier, some can be an early onset menopause, and that it never actually ends.
Right.
Because once those hormones drop off, they drop off. And again, they do have hormone replacement therapy, but they have discovered over the years that causes breast cancer. So here's your flip flop. What do I want to have hot flashes, or do I want to have breast cancer?
Let's talk a little bit about then, because one thing that you said that really struck me as interesting. So the medication for the hot flashes has a tendency to cause breast cancer.
Yeah, but it's not necessarily just for hot flashes, because
Right.
other things go on.
The
as
medication that's supposed to
Night
help
sweats
menopause.
and stuff that's supposed to help menopause for years, like that. My Mother's Day, this is
Right.
where my aunt who did get breast cancer at 79 had been back those where like, oh, here we have this hormone replacement that you can do. It's all great, and of course it's 20 years later when they find out it can cause breast cancer. There are new ones, and I'm not familiar with them, because I've only just found out about them. There are new ones that they say don't have those. It's a new, which is what they're saying now, that are not supposed to have the
Cancerous effects.
The cancerous effects. I went through it straight up, no nothing.
You just decided to not do the medication whatsoever.
Not medication. I had looked into something that my gynecologist had recommended at a period of time that would have been a surgery with about 3 to 4 days worth of recovery. I opted against that as well. I just thought, you know what? I'm just going to straight up do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it, like I said, it doesn't actually end. I'm not in the throes of it now because it's been. I mean, they consider menopause is when you go for 1 year, 12 months without having a period. Once that happens, then you're postmenopause. Then that's the one thing. So it's been probably 5 years.
Gotcha.
I still have, some of the night sweats, but the big problem with menopause is because it can be so tied in to all sorts of other things. Fibromyalgia is one of those that has the same symptoms. You can have a couple of different diseases. They all run the same way. The thyroid. If you have an inactive thyroid, you will get the fatigue, the hot flashes. So it's very difficult to figure out which is which. Is one feeding the other? I just decided not to do anything at all.
Because you were just like, screw it.
I don't want to take any chances with anything unless I have to.
Like we have a specialized person for our vagina. We have a specialized person for our boobs. But what about? But that's all like
all the rest of me.
Yeah, all the rest of it.
There's more to me than just that. Yeah. No, it's kind of. I think that's one of the reasons that women's healthcare costs are so high is because we have all of these other issues to deal with that men don't necessarily.
And there's fewer research studies done on women's health.
Yes, I'm hoping that will change. We have more women that are
going into STEM careers and
going into to be medical doctors than we've ever had before. More women than men, and so hopefully that will change in the future because when women are involved, they look at things from a woman's side of view.
Exactly.
My first 2 children were delivered by by male gynecologists, and so they're telling you, "Oh, this is perfectly natural. This shouldn't hurt that much," and you're going.
No, but it does.
Have you had a child? And Lexi was delivered by a female doctors, and it's a totally different thing.
They treat you differently.
They've had children.
They treat you like they actually understand what's going on. They can communicate with you,
and so they know. And so hopefully, with so many women going into medicine now, hopefully your generation will have far more doctors who know what they're talking about and who understand menopause. My doctor that I have now, I don't even know what you call older women's medicine.
Yeah, right.
Something like that. Yeah,
not quite. The average, the normal of women's medicine.
Not just gynecological, but let's take gynecological from middle age going forward, because you still have to kind of take a look and take care of everything.
Yeah.
So
just because you stop having a period doesn't mean that you stop functioning. And stop having health issues.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So
it seems like you actually have more complications going in because then you're more likely to get other variations of
things that go along
things
with
that happen.
Right. And so with any luck and crossing our fingers, your generation will have doctors who are prepared for this and will know all the linkages and the different things that they can do. And the thing that scares me is like we were talking earlier about breast cancer, it's not a one size fits all.
Right.
And that's to go back to the insurance where we have issues. Well, if only one kind of thing is available for menopause that happens to be an HRT that's going to cause breast cancer, well, your doctor has no place to work with you.
Right.
And if that's the only thing that's going to be offered by an insurance company, but there might be something over here that's available, but they don't cover it, you're not giving women any options.
Right.
Is all I'm saying.
And it's like the same thing when you're actually in breast cancer too. It seems like there's only one kind of treatment option. Once you're there, and this was something that Lori was saying yesterday, which I found super interesting, was she's like, once you're in the cancer industry, you don't get options. You're just literally doing everything that people tell you to do.
Right.
And, you know, you go through chemo. Chemo is literally like the only kind of option right now for treatment. Why don't we have other kinds of treatment? If we're raising so much money for in the name of breast cancer and breast cancer research, why don't we have more research in different kinds of treatment?
Other options, other, you know, medications.
Because it's not going to fit everyone. You know, one woman is going to react super poorly to chemotherapy, and it is just. I mean, chemotherapy sucks no matter what.
Yeah.
But some women just physically just cannot do it. You know, and when you get to the stage 4 types of cancer, they're not going to be able to go through. Like, their bodies are already physically so weak that they won't be able to go through.
The treatment itself.
The treatment itself is not going to work.
Yeah. That's. I mean, I don't know. I can't say for sure, but you wonder sometimes when they say, "Oh, well, we found this, and we can do this for breast cancer," and it basically practically kills you going through it. Are they just stopping their research? I mean, okay, so you say you found this, and you know, if you catch the cancer soon enough and you do this should be fine. Well, then did you stop research on anything else that you can do?
Yeah.
Like other options, other ways of treating these differently? Does the research stop? What is happening with all that?
Right.
What is happening with all that money that does go into the research?
Sure.
What are they coming up with?
Right.
Have we seen anything other than what we've got now?
Nope.
You know,
like you keep hearing that research has been advancing over the last 10 years. And sure, 10 years ago, treatment was so much worse. I mean, we barely had chemo. You know, chemotherapy was still a fresh thing. You know, a newer thing. But even now, we've had chemo for at least 10, 15 years at this point.
Yeah, I would think.
And the only other option we have is radiation therapy. I mean, you're essentially killing your cells either way.
Yeah.
You're getting burns. You're killing
I think that's true of a lot of the cancers.
Yeah.
Just in general,
you just have to go through chemo.
What are the options that you have? You know.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, yeah. Because I'm just thinking, my mother-in-law had a bone cancer, and going through that, and it was the same thing. It's the same type of thing, and it does make you very, very sick.
And lose all your hair,
and all of that sort of thing, because you're killing practically everything as well as the cancer.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, I mean, hopefully.
And then they pump you with steroids, so that way you can still live and rebuild yourself from the ground up, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what about the before? You know,
I think that is the next step, is how do we find out before it happened? How do we prevent it from happening?
Easy.
Of any kind.
Right.
I mean,
any kind of cancer in general. You know.
Spotty anyway.
We have questions for you.
Oh.
Because you studied health sciences, right?
Can we see if your breasts are...
They're not.
They're not.
They're not. God.
But so you studied. Go ahead and talk about what you studied real quick in undergrad and graduate school.
So I got a bachelor's degree in kinesiology, and then I got a master's degree. The technical master is kinesiology and health, but I got my concentration in exercise and health sciences.
Sure.
So we basically, I'm trying to think, a lot of research stuff and a lot of biophysics, biomechanics, physical activity, prescription exercise, stuff like that.
So one thing that we were talking about was the fact that there are so many doctors that don't have any kind of experience whatsoever in menopause and general later stages of women's health.
Yeah.
Very much so. Did you ever get any kind of lecture or lessons about cancer or about diseases? Specifically, like women.
So not in like a way that you would in like specialty, but a lot of my classes were about aging and aging health
Did you talk about like menopause at all? Or?
Yeah, we talked a little about menopause, a little bit about like women's health. We looked at it both globally and within our country, because globally, is important too. Looking at how that is different. Like one of the books we read was about, it was called Blue Zones. So it's basically about places in the world where there's a very high concentration of people that have hit 100, like age 100.
Yeah.
And looking at their lifestyle, places in the United States and places like all over the world, and what we learn from them, and how they stay healthy, not just hitting 100 but being bedridden, but hitting 100, 110,
and having a good heart and having good blood pressure,
and how that happens basically. It was more of a broad like public health class, not clinical. So we weren't doing
research
stuff,
and anything
but
like that.
We did do some research. We did have to do some stuff that was about like gene splicing and stuff like that. I know I did something on that, basically about how new things are coming up with how we can change our DNA with like splicing and inserting, and how that could potentially be used to help with diseases. But yeah, I mean, it was more like a broad public health standpoint.
Sure. So a couple questions. The first one, how much time did you spend actually talking about women's health? Or any time that you did any kind of research whatsoever in your undergraduate, graduate, any kind of lectures you did on women's health?
So we talked specifically about women's health in a lot of my public health classes, so in undergrad and grad school. I had a lot more in undergrad just because you have more hours, obviously.
Right, yeah.
But a lot of it in undergrad, and it was more in the context of country, in different countries and stuff like that, and how countries view women, and then how that translates into health. In grad, especially with like exercise, looking at injuries and recovery in women is very different. The classic example that you'll hear from like anybody who's kinesiology is ACL injuries are a lot higher in women because of your skeletal system, just how you are. Women have deeper Q angles. Like for example, I think the highest rate of ACL injuries is in women's soccer. And so a lot of new ACL surgeries that are coming out, because I mean, in the past 10 years, I mean, you can recover from an ACL surgery so quickly, and that's because there's different surgeries. So taking, replacing it with different parts from your body, and it's so much better. And they do a lot of those studies on women because it is so much harder, which is really revolutionary, because like research studies don't use women a lot.
They don't.
Just because like historically, it's always just been men that are doctors, men, especially in exercise. You look at football players, you look at soccer players, you look at hockey players, that's the majority of those players that are, when I say useful, I mean applicable to what people want to use. Yeah. Especially with things like funding. So a lot of hockey studies, like ice hockey studies, are men because they get funded through countries or through teams. I know a lot, especially in Asia and in Europe, a lot of hockey studies are funded through professional teams, and the professional teams that can afford to fund it are men's national teams. So that is an example. But in exercise, they're starting to use women a lot more, and especially in nutrition as well, because nutrition tends to focus more on women, I think because of the stigma, but you can like move that to a good thing.
Right.
You can twist that into something good.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Be like, hey, like we're finally using more women in studies, like we should be.
Yeah, nutrition studies are pretty equally, at least in certain like things about diet and things about childhood, like how nutrition can help childhood diseases or development issues are pretty equally men and women. I think that also is just pressure from people now being like, okay, you need to use.
You do so many studies with men.
Studies, or they might do, like the way that you break up subjects. So you might match pair them, meaning okay, you have a group of boys and a group of girls, and you match pair them based on maybe height or weight. So then it's equal, because men and women aren't the same.
Right.
So especially if you need to do things with exercise with like weight. Obviously something with a smaller woman is going to be completely different than something with a football player. So the thing is, yes, you can have a study that only uses men, but it's important to do the same study using women. Mm-hmm. That's more like what people are getting at. So
why do you think that is? That we just don't, like, scientists just don't use any women?
I mean, historically, I think it's because medicine has always been male dominated.
Sure.
Until now.
No, but historically, it's been male dominated. Doctors have been male. They don't see, especially when the lifespans were a lot shorter. They could use men especially in things like drug trials.
Right.
This is like speculation on my part, so like I don't have facts to back this up. But I also think a lot of it is because it takes time, and women have always had to take care of children, always had to do that kind of thing, and they can't risk the woman in the house the way that they can risk men in the house.
Right.
I think the biggest thing is that medicine has been male dominated for so long.
Sure.
But that is changing because I think now medical students are equal, if not more, women that are medical students. So that's
awesome.
That is changing. And just like the amount of people like our age that are going into medicine is more than ever before, despite the fact that the money might not be there to pay for it. People are still wanting to do it. And I think that's big too, because I think those biases held by doctors that are older are never going to be broken by them.
You have to bring in a whole new generation.
To bring in a whole new generation, because like I heard y'all talking a little bit about, about how menopause isn't covered. And I think that is one, just because again, it's been male dominated. I also think it's because it's hard to get people who have been doing it for so long to change their way of thinking.
Right.
And that's one thing that they really pushed on us in grad school, is that you always have to be open to something new coming out. Like for a long time.
Because research changes all the time.
Right, research changes all the time.
Yeah.
Like people didn't know smoking was bad for you, and now we look back and it's like, how could you not know smoking? Well,
The Surgeon General used to say you couldn't smoke.
right. It's like, so you gotta not hold on to that bias, and I think that's so hard for people to break, both men and women.
Right.
So I think that's a big thing. But
Do you guys do anything concerning like insurance companies' involvement with women's health or cancer or?
we didn't do specifically insurance, but we talked about the healthcare systems in general and comparing them in like a pretty non-biased way, just like looking at how it affects certain groups of people, how it affects long-term and that kind of thing, and then also in context of different countries and their groups. Mm-hmm. So looking at basically graphs of the age population for, we're trending towards more people being older because of the baby boomer,
right?
Whereas and less children because younger people aren't having as many children
because we already have too many people on this planet.
They're having kids later. Whereas countries like India is always the example. They go like this,
yeah,
and it's a giant country. Lots of people in the country, and how that affects health. So it wasn't insurance in that sense of, it wasn't more of like the litigation of insurance, but it was more of how healthcare is viewed. Mm-hmm. In sense of it more being a public versus private, how just how it's viewed. Like I know we were talking about the U.S. and how much money you spend per person is a lot more than a lot of other countries, and then looking at our health as a whole as a country, how that sometimes doesn't translate.
Yeah.
And looking at that with other countries as well, which is pretty interesting. You would think we would have a better standard of living for how much we're paying per person.
Sure.
Not saying we have a bad standard of living, but looking at things like the age of mortality, so the age of death.
Sure.
Of us with other first world countries versus you would think it would be a little better. That says something, but then we also have a lot of medical education, which feeds into that because there's a lot of debt. So just a lot of things like that. Y'all were talking earlier about how in medical school, I did not go to medical school. In medical school, they talk very little about
older women's health.
Yeah, older women's health.
Like we have specialists for vaginas and boobs, but
and one of my professors went off about it because it pisses him off.
Talk about this. I'm ready.
It's not like groundbreaking, but
Right.
like, the same thing for exercise. You would be surprised at it's something like 11 hours or something in medical school that is, they don't look at exercise as its own field.
Right.
And, you know, to be fair, you can't cover every single thing in medical school.
Sure.
That's why you specialize in something.
Right.
But you still don't get, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, you still, they don't learn anything about exercise in the view of the way I learned it. So I think that's also a big problem of why obesity, especially in, I don't want to say especially in women, but we're talking about women, but
Right.
in women as well.
We're talking about women's
So
health.
people have, doctors sometimes have a hard time separating obesity and other medical problems. If you're obese, all of your medical problems are because you're obese. That's what they think. That's
Right.
not true. You hear all of these horror stories about, they're telling you, oh, just exercise more, just eat right, do all these things, and you realize they had cancer.
Yeah.
And they never caught it because all they were focusing on was their weight. Not saying that you shouldn't be concerned about your weight, because you can, it can lead to diabetes, you know.
Yeah, it's got its own.
But they don't look at prescription exercise the way that we do. Like the stuff that I learned my first, you know, ever kinesiology class, they probably don't know. You know, like how to prescribe exercise. That's a real thing. Everyone's like, what is prescribe? It's exactly what it sounds like.
Prescription exercise.
If you're prescribing an exercise plan to somebody, everyone's like, oh, like personal training? Like, kind of like, personal trainers do that. But like, physical
There's more,
therapists do that.
yeah.
There's more to that. You know,
There's more medicine and research
there's more
behind
medicine
it.
and research involved, and it's, if somebody has a goal, or whether it be a personal goal or a health goal, if they're pre-diabetic and need to get, you know, their blood pressure, their glucose levels to certain places, what should they be doing? Mm-hmm. You would be hard pressed to find a medical doctor that actually knows what that means. No shade, but
What I really think that she should do with her kinesiology background and, you know, her health nutrition, because of the fact that we are an aging society, that she should really start up something that is for women over 55. It's very difficult. You've got your bar, you've got all these different places that do all these different fun, like exercise things or whatever. Except that when you're 55 and you have arthritis in your hips, and certainly you can't do certain things.
Right.
So therefore, you're kind of in a place where, yeah, you can go do a Zumba class, but you can't move and you can't keep up with it because nobody offers exercise.
so interestingly, that's actually what exercise prescription is.
Oh, there you go.
Look at, there's math involved. Sorry, folks, for you're not
Just keep it nice and simple.
I'm not gonna. I mean, it's basic plug-in formulas, but
Sure.
it's looking at what you're able to do. So when you prescribe exercise, it's not necessarily. So it's looking. So your intensity, you know, light, moderate, vigorous. You know. So the national standard is, you know, 3 to 5 days a week, 150 minutes of moderate or 75 minutes of vigorous exercise. So that's like kind of the basic. That's what they say that you should do. So that's frequency, intensity, time, and so the type. So you have cardio. You know, you have your cardiovascular. You have resistance, and you have like weight training, that kind of stuff. So obviously, I'm not going to make somebody who's 65 bench press, right? Like that's not happening. So you don't just look at that. You can look at. So intensity is not always just measured arbitrarily. So you can look at like your MET. So that a MET is a way of measuring your output. So, which is milliliters per kilogram per minute, and it's like 3.5 translates to 1 MET. Look at me using my degree. So that's
There are just a lot of factors that go into it.
There's just a lot of factors, and I think you have to listen to what they're saying, because I think that is also a big part. Because if something doesn't work, it's like with medication or with any kind of
Not the same thing's going to work for
or
everyone.
behavioral therapy. Not the first thing you're going to try is not always going to work. But I think with exercise prescription is like people don't realize that working out and getting healthy isn't just being in the gym or lifting weights or the grind. I think we have that now
We have the grind
especially,
mentality.
that mentality, you see things with like Instagram, and you see things like there's that section too. That
Fitness models,
and that also doesn't translate to older Americans either. So I think, you know, gardening, I use that example because that was on the list, and it's like
it's simple, it's
2
nice,
or 3
it's
mets, but that's getting up and down, that's digging, that's using your arms. You know,
you're doing something.
You do that. Let's say, you know, so you can calculate how many mets you need to burn, you want to hit per week,
sure,
or whatever. So you calculate that, and then you figure out, okay, what are you already doing? So, I mean, prescription exercise is a big thing.
And even coming back to, like, the cancer part of it, like, even dealing with women who are coming out of cancer, you know, prescription medicine can be huge for that.
Yeah, and that's where hospitals, so exercise physiologists, that's what they do. So they're in hospitals, and they're the ones that monitor, they prescribe and then monitor. So, like, one of my friends did that. She was at a hospital, and she would do, I think she was in cardiac recovery, so people that just had heart surgery. She was there, you know, they were all with, you know, everything on them, monitoring them to make sure that they weren't doing too much, prescribing the exercise, making sure that what they were doing fits their recovery. So they're getting that exercise, that normal exercise you need, especially after surgery, because you're, you know, sometimes you can be bedridden, right?
Right.
And your muscles start, you know, wasting and that kind of thing. But you also don't want to push yourself after you just have heart surgery. Same thing with cancer, right? Depending on the type of cancer is different, but that's a group of certified people as well.
Right.
So they get their certification through different, like ACSM, American College of Sport Medicine. They have exercise physiology certifications. That same thing as nurses require you to do clinical hours and stuff like that. So that's what they do.
Sure.
And that's their job, and that's important, and you don't mess around with that. Hospitals don't mess around with that. That's a little different than somebody coming in wanting to lose weight, as opposed to,
it's like it's a different subcategory of
post-op,
yeah,
right? But it's not, but it is.
It's a slightly different subcategory of physical prescription medication.
There's way more risks.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more, you know, obviously coming out of cancer. But then, you know, if you're in remission and now you might have health risks on top of you've been bedridden, that kind of thing. That's a little different too. So, you know, and you see, like, after having a baby, that's different too, right? Your body's still recovering. Everyone recovers differently. Every weight recovery is different after each child, right? So there's that too. Some people might have different goals. A lot of people want to lose baby weight. Some people, if they had a hard pregnancy, might not care about losing baby weight at that moment because they're dealing with everything else.
Right.
Might just want to have muscles in their stomach again.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Like, I think people also prey on women that just had babies. I think companies do that because they can easily go for you want to lose that baby weight, not thinking of it as like, okay, this is a person that just had a baby.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
they're dealing with a whole other list of complications.
If they had to have a C-section, that's different. If they had a baby that had to be in the NICU, I mean, that's a different emotional, like, that
trauma, and
losing weight is probably not the priority. So looking at that as well. We also have to look at people who, like, had gestational diabetes, which is diabetes that you get during pregnancy, but then it goes away. That's super dangerous. And a lot of the times with gestational diabetes or G-diabetes, you might have to go into the hospital 3 times a week to get your blood tested because it can be very dangerous for you and for the baby. And if you didn't have diabetes prior, then, you know, you might have to change the way you eat. You're already changed the way you eat because you're pregnant. So, like, that also goes into the recovery with any exercise you may need because, okay, now you don't have the gestational diabetes anymore, but your body just went through this trauma of having diabetes. So that, and there's not a lot known about that in terms of, like, the recovery.
Sure.
Because that's a completely different diabetes than type 1 and type 2. It's purely because of the pregnancy.
Sure.
So that, and of course, that's purely women's health. It's a fairly new area of...
Yeah, what is your thought on women's health and sort of the priority of it within insurance companies and to health professionals? And is there, like, a large difference between the two? Do health professionals take women's health a little more seriously than insurance companies do? Or is there a link?
I mean, it's would be a very general statement. I think in general, people in the health insurance industry are not doctors. They don't actually know anything about. That's not their goal, right? Like they're not.
They're strictly a bottom line.
I mean, yes, but I mean, they also insurance companies working with hospitals is also very important in whatever country you might be in, because hospitals need money too, and people always think of hospitals as these big whatever. I mean, there's teaching hospitals that don't have that much money, and they still need to be able to cover any, they always have like a lawyer for litigation. They need to run things, and so it's just as important for hospitals to get their money as it is for people to get things covered. And that go away, and that can be different. I mean, that can lead to a conflict of interest between hospitals, because the person doesn't want to, the patient might not want to pay for it, the hospital doesn't want to pay for it, the insurance doesn't want to pay for it.
Right.
Okay, it needs to get paid for.
Yeah.
So,
who's paying for it?
I think and again, there's a shift in thinking. I think doctors in general are caring more and more about women's health because people are making them care more about women's health. I also think with more women becoming doctors,
they're naturally just caring more.
There's going to be a natural.
Not saying that every female doctor is perfect, because I've heard some horror stories about that.
Absolutely.
Especially in gynecology, horror stories about male gynecologists.
Just random side thought. How do you guys get into gynecology? That's
I'm not gonna hate on male gynecologists, because
dope. But
Well, I had them for
fine.
the longest time because it was really there weren't any women
which
when I was young
think is
who were gynecologists. It
weird,
wasn't
but
until
again, that turns into more women are becoming doctors.
right.
And I think, there's certain things that, I mean, everything in medicine I think is gendered, but there are certain things overall that aren't gendered, but I think gynecology is definitely one of those. And I think we need more female gynecologists. And as, people our age grow into the profession,
There will be a natural
and
shift.
then they go
too.
through menopause, and then they become
The menopause
now
experts.
have residents that they can teach. I think it's a natural progression. I think in general, like I said, doctors, I think it's harsh to say doctors never cared. I think it's, you have a lot of patients, and sometimes you get kind of like the exercise, you get into the line of thinking that the one size fits all, because you have to get through people, and you're not, especially in hospitals versus private practice, where you have a little bit more flexibility. If you're, especially like doctors that see a plethora of people, especially like ER doctors, you're not one-on-one with that person for a very long time.
Sure.
And that's because, especially you are trying to make money, right?
Right.
And so that's why it's also difficult. It's like with private, you own your own practice. You can spend more time if you want to, but you also have to make sure that you are having money flow in, right? Because you need to keep your practice open.
Right.
But I think people are making people care about women's health. I think a lot of that is speaking out about it, right?
Well, I think
as with anything else that's going on.
You guys have something that people of my generation did not have, and you have social media.
Right.
You have a way for the voice to be heard. And nobody did. You went and you had your baby, and then what I mean. There was nothing. There was nobody banding together and saying, "You do know we're different from men, and we got different parts and that sort of thing." That just didn't happen, and it was better for me. And for you guys, it's going to be better. But you do have the social media.
Yeah.
You do have a way of talking about these things.
Yeah.
And then again, female gynecologist. I didn't go to a female gynecologist until I was 34. All I had was male gynecologists.
Yeah.
They existed, but I mean that's all I had. And then when I found one, the pregnancy was completely different when I was having Lexi, because of the fact I was in a team of 4 women gynecologists,
Yeah.
Who could understand and could really give you proper
a very different
care.
experience, because rather than doctors back then, I can remember from when I was a teenager, were all very patriarchal. That's like there's a father. Don't you're worrying about something you don't need to worry about. Kind of you don't have to worry about that. You know,
You're fine. Don't worry.
And without an understanding of mixing everything together, the brain, emotions, the body, the whole thing. Well, how do you deal with somebody? And I think it's getting better because of the fact that there are more and more women coming in, and more women are speaking up and saying, wait a minute, there are all these needs that nobody is dealing with, and no doctors are getting trained in certain areas.
Well, thing online somewhere, I can't remember where, but basically talking about like after people had babies, like what they wish they knew, and it was just how you read all of those what to expect you're expecting, but like the more, and I think it's because it's kind of like things involving bodily fluid, things you don't talk about. Okay, why didn't I know that before I was having a baby? Why didn't anybody tell me this, right? Like, people are way more open about it now. Like, I mean,
Yes.
my, like, you know, sisters-in-law have, like, talked about things when they've had children that, like, that would be indecent to talk about not that long ago.
Oh,
But
things were not
right.
talked about. You
I
go
was
back.
just telling myself.
I'm just gonna say, hold your thought. But you go back to your grandmother's era. You didn't talk about it at all. It just was not discussed.
Right, and now it's like...
It was,
okay,
you keep quiet about it, have the baby, and move on.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, like for example, this thread, I think I might have been on like Twitter or something, but it was like, okay, why didn't nobody tell me that there was a possibility that I would pass clots? I literally thought I was dying because I passed this huge clot after I had a baby, and the doctor treated me like I was stupid because I didn't know that. Well, how was I supposed to know that? Nobody told me. I never had a baby before.
I'm not born knowing
These things.
Yeah.
And it's, or, you know, things about, you know, just like gross things that you don't know. Like you might poop when you have a kid. You probably will. Why didn't nobody tell me that? I felt like an idiot. You know, it's just like, why are these things not talked about? I think now they are. Like, we're social media. People are more open about it. You have family members that have children. Like,
it's the coming
talk
up of the
about it.
generations
and
that
I think
are...
having more female doctors, more female nurses, male nurses working with more female doctors, or you know, male doctors and male nurses working with more female professionals, you know, that kind of, I mean, not like bashing male doctors.
Oh, no,
but,
of
like,
course not.
You don't have children.
Yeah.
You don't know. And, you know,
They can only have so much
you can only
empathy
have
for it.
You can only know so much if it's not experience that you have. And so, you know, especially I think having children is the big one that people just like don't know. And it was always, you know, like you were saying, you would always like defer questions to the husband. I'm like, I'm sorry, is he having the baby? No.
Yeah.
Why are you asking him things? Or like, you know, there's some like pretty bad stuff out there of you know.
I've heard horror stories about women who were going through getting mastectomies, and the doctors would actually like belittle them for not wanting to get their breasts rebuilt.
Like
Yeah, they would be like, oh, but you want to get married? Like, don't you want to get married one day? Don't you want to keep dating? Don't you want to, you know, do
like,
this,
well,
that, and the
not
other
have
thing?
breast cancer. Like, that's what I want to not have.
Yeah.
So,
I'd much rather not have cancer. I'm not worried about getting married
and it's
in
like, okay, so
5
you're
years.
saying to my face as a professional that you value the look more than health.
My breasts more than my body.
And the fact that having, you know, getting the reshaping done also then carries its own risk, because a lot of times it's a separate surgery.
Yeah.
Like, I want to try to not have as many surgeries as possible, you know? And it's, you know, stuff, same thing with, like, having kids, you know? Like, if
It's just treated very
if
lightly.
something happens, if you have a C-section, if you, like, have tearing or something, it's like, okay, don't do anything against my will. My husband isn't the end-all be-all. I don't actually, like, care, like, what he thinks, and
Yeah.
sorry, but, like...
But it's true. This is my body. Like,
yeah, it's like, you can, whatever. It's like, I want to be healthy, you know? It's like...
I don't want to die having a child. I
Right.
don't want to die in surgery
And I
because
think
you
that's
did
also
something I didn't give permission to.
And I think that's actually a big thing. That's one of the things where you measure the state of health in a country. One of you look at mortality year, so like how old, you know, the average age that people die, basically. You look, but one of the things you look at is maternal deaths. So people that die in
Pregnancy.
in birth, and the U.S. is kind of up there. Like it's actually like pretty. I mean, if you look at it in terms of
crazy.
other of other
in comparison to other countries.
In comparison to other countries, it's not where it should be with how much money we put into healthcare and how much money people pay. And a lot of that is because it's in and out. You know, they're not doing that as much anymore. You stay longer.
Not me.
But staying, but every single night you stay in a hospital, you have to pay more money.
Yeah.
Right? And if you don't need it, insurance won't pay for it. Whereas some other places, they make you stay for 5 days because they don't want you.
And insurance can completely cover it sometimes.
Right. And, you know, and of course, different hospitals, different states have different policies, but like that's one of the ways that you look at health in a country is looking at the amount per, 1,000 or 100,000 women that die in childbirth. Like that's a way of measuring it, and it's not where it should be. And I think a lot of that is because of the way that we still view childbirth, which is slowly getting better. But I also think the way that we look at child loss is also very not where it should be. So that's another thing too that needs to be. There's been a lot of more psychological studies coming out in recent years that I've been reading about infant loss and childbirth loss and miscarriages and stuff like that. But like that's also an area that people don't really know what to do. They know what to do medically, but they don't know what to do afterwards. If that makes sense.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So that's also like a part that needs to be looked at. Believe it or not, women psychologists are better at dealing with that. Yeah. So.
Believe it or not.
Believe it or not.
Women can tend to help other women a little easier.
Yeah. So, and like how that affects later pregnancies and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Well, this was a fun conversation. Thanks for hanging, guys. Thanks for chatting. Appreciate it. Much love.
If you got anything that you can use, but
Everything. Well, because this will be a good episode about just general health and women's health.
I think that does need to be addressed.
Yeah, it does need to be addressed. We're talking about Women's Health in Breast Cancer Month. That is part of women's health.
You have to go on the other side and say we're not just tits.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a whole lot more to us than that, and an overall general health. And just like bouncing back to what I'd said about Lexi, that I was thinking you really need to go into an elder exercise type of thing. I was a certified trainer. I weighed 105 pounds. I ran a women's health club. It was only women because the great thing is a lot of women don't want to have to exercise in front of men. They want to go in. They don't want to have to look beautiful. They don't want to do anything. They want to exercise in front of men. But the majority of them were people who were about the same age as I was. When you're older and you have more difficult and you can't keep up with the aerobics instructor and that sort of thing, you don't want to be an old person at the gym. So
because then you're not only old, but then you're a woman and that doesn't want to exercise in front of a man.
And you're not able to do some of the things that they're trying to have you do because, I used to do the kickboxing and stuff like that. This leg does not do that anymore. I have bad arthritis in the right hip and it's really difficult. So I'm just saying if you're to do a situation where women can come in and get a pre-planned thing that they can do and they're with other women who are also older and also have those issues that if you feel more like you belong, you will be more likely to do it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that might be the next step in healthcare is guiding your healthcare to older women and programs that they're able to do.
Right.
Because I remember, I'd teaching a class and there'd be the ones and they'd be at the very back and they were a little slower and they couldn't quite keep up. And that's just people that were my age.
Right.
So when you're older and you're looking around at everybody else who's in, amazing shape and can do this and keep up and you're like, okay, but I can get down, but I can't get back up kind of thing.
Yeah.
I just think because I'm the person entering into the elder stage.
Well, obviously you're concerned. You're a concerned person that you're not going to be taken care of.
Are you concerned about cancer and getting cancer? I'm concerned about just getting myself to a point that I can feel good
right.
after all sorts of other things. The extreme fatigue that also comes with you know, the menopause and that sort of thing. Because
You're just worried about being taken care of properly.
just getting to that place where I can feel comfortable to go in and work with somebody and learn it, and you know, hell, maybe I'm the one that should go get recertified and start that. I mean, because it is a thing. If you feel uncomfortable in a situation, you won't go back.
Right.
You won't keep doing it, you know? Mm-hmm. You need different kinds of equipment. It becomes much more difficult to do things that are impact.
Right.
So you don't want a treadmill, you want a walking glider where you're not doing impact on your hips and joints.
Right.
You just can't take it anymore. You know, you don't want to do more damage. So, I just think that that's something that needs to be looked at the whole entire overall picture. We're not just young.
We age.
It's not just childbearing years that you need to worry about. It's the whole entire thing. Mm-hmm. You know?
And a lot of it just gets overlooked.
And it does. It gets overlooked. And then here goes the
And then there you go.
you know. No, it's fine. It takes me a minute.
Well, thanks guys. Love you.
Yeah.
Love you much.
I didn't have internet this morning, so I didn't get to see today's post. But
Oh, it's all good.
Look at it. As soon as
It's fixed.
Huh?
I
You
think
think it's fixed?
I think it's
I'll go check because I couldn't get in this morning. Okay.
I'm apparently the only one who can unplug something from the wall. So
And we're done.
there are two other